My uncle secretly stalked me as a kid, and my parents covered it up. When I was 8, my cousins and I played hide and seek at my uncle's house during one of those weekend family gatherings where the adults drink and the kids disappear into every crevice of the house. I thought I found the perfect spot. The hallway at the end of the second floor was narrow and mostly unused, and at the very end of it was a closet with a loose handle. I slipped in, pulled the door shut, and crouched behind some coats. But when I leaned back, I felt air. Cold, damp air. There was another door behind me. I stepped into a small room that smelled like mildew and something else I didn't have a name for back then. Now I know. It was the stench of secrets rotting in a space built for silence, a place where my uncle did things so vile, the walls should have screamed. Inside were shelves stacked with binders, a beat-up laptop playing muted videos of kids on a loop, and a thick black book with my name written on the spine. I opened it. There were dozens of pictures of me, sleeping, changing, playing outside. Some looked like they were taken through windows, others looked like security footage. My stomach felt like it dropped through the floor. I backed out of the room, shut both doors, and didn't say a word until we got home that night. Then I told my parents. I remember sitting on the edge of their bed, my whole body shaking. I told them what I saw, what I found, what was in the book. They just stared at each other. Then my mom told me I must have dreamed it, that I was just trying to get out of trouble for snooping. My dad said I was being dramatic and that this kind of talk could destroy the family. That was the word they used, destroy. They told me to forget it and never say a word again. So I did. I never went back to that part of the house, never played hide and seek again. I started keeping my door locked and slept with a light on. Over time, I convinced myself I had exaggerated it in my head. Maybe it was just a weird office. Maybe it really was a dream. I was 24 when the news broke. My uncle had been arrested after trying to lure a little girl into his car outside an elementary school. The story hit every local news station. But what got me was the photo. The girl looked almost exactly like I did when I was 8. Same haircut, same pink dress, same little tie-dye shoes. That night, the memories came back like they never left. The black book, the laptop, the way the room had been so hidden it felt like something out of a movie. I called my parents. My mom said it was a horrible misunderstanding and that bringing up old accusations would just make everything worse. My dad told me it had nothing to do with me and warned me not to go poking around again. 2 days later, I got a call from the prosecutor. They had reason to believe I had been one of his early victims. They asked if I remembered anything, if I was willing to testify. At first, I said I wasn't sure. Then they told me they had done a preliminary search of the house. They found the black book with my name on it. It had been in my uncle's bedroom drawer. They said it looked worn, like someone had been flipping through it for years, but they couldn't find anything else. No other books, no evidence of other kids. For a while, I felt paralyzed. That's when I remembered the hallway, the way the door opened in the back, how the carpet dipped ever so slightly near the closet. So I told them exactly where to look. The hallway at the end of the second floor, the closet, the back panel that looked like a wall. A week later, they called me again. They found it. The room, the binders, the laptop, dozens of books, all labeled with different names. Some matched missing children reports going back 20 years. A few of the bodies had never been found until now. He had kept maps, burial notes, video logs. No one in my family was talking about it. My dad stopped replying to my messages. My mom sent a single text that said, "You don't know the damage you're doing." A week later, I went back to their house to drop off some old mail, and my dad wasn't home, but his study door was open. I've never been allowed in there. I don't know what made me look, but I did. Inside his bottom drawer was a binder, just one, but it matched the others I'd seen. Same spine, same stickers, same layout. This one had a name I didn't recognize, but the photo clip to the first page made my blood freeze. A 9-year-old girl playing on the swings, with no idea some man was taking pictures of her. It wasn't just my uncle. My dad was involved too. I stood there in my dad's study, staring at the binder in my hands, feeling like the floor was about to open up and swallow me whole. The girl in the photo looked so innocent, just swinging and laughing, completely unaware, just like I had been. My hands started shaking so bad I almost dropped the damn thing. I heard the front door open and quickly shoved the binder back in the drawer, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst through my chest. I managed to slip out of the study and into the hallway before my dad came in. I mumbled something about dropping off mail and practically ran to my car. I sat there in the driveway for what felt like forever, my keys in my hand, unable to start the engine. What the hell was I supposed to do now? This wasn't just about my uncle anymore. This was my dad, my own father. I finally drove home in a daze, nearly missing my exit twice. When I got to my apartment, I locked the door, then checked it 3 times to make sure. I pulled all the blinds shut and sat on my couch in the dark. I couldn't process what I'd found. Part of me wanted to pretend I never saw it, to just go back to my life and forget all of this, but I knew I couldn't, not anymore. I called the prosecutor the next morning. Her name was Jacqueline Wilson, and she'd been nothing but kind to me through this whole nightmare. I told her what I found in my dad's study. She went quiet for a moment, then asked if I was willing to help them investigate further. They needed evidence, she said. Something concrete they could use. I agreed without really thinking it through. What choice did I have? This was bigger than me now. There were other victims, other kids who might still be in danger. I couldn't just walk away. Jacqueline set up a meeting with me and a detective named Stephen Matthews at a coffee shop near my apartment. Detective Matthews was younger than I expected, maybe mid-30s, with tired eyes and a serious expression that rarely changed. His cologne smelled faintly of sandalwood and mint as he leaned forward across the small table between us. He explained that they needed to build a solid case against my dad, and the binder I found wasn't enough on its own. "We need a confession," he said, keeping his voice low even though we were sitting in a corner away from other customers, "or more concrete evidence linking him to these crimes." I asked what they wanted me to do. That's when they laid out their plan. They wanted me to wear a wire and get my dad to talk about what he and my uncle had done. I nearly laughed in their faces. My dad? Talk about this? The man who had spent my entire life making sure I never mentioned what I saw that day? He'll never open up to me, I said. He shut me down when I was 8, and he's been shutting me down ever since. Detective Matthews leaned forward. People like your father and uncle, they keep these secrets for decades. But now that it's coming out, there's pressure. Cracks forming. Sometimes they want to talk, to justify themselves, especially to family members. I wasn't convinced, but I agreed to try. What else could I do? They gave me a small recording device that looked like a normal USB drive and showed me how to use it. All I had to do was press a button on the side to start recording. Simple enough, but my hands were sweating just thinking about it. The next day, I called my dad and asked if we could meet for lunch, just the 2 of us. I said I wanted to talk about what was happening with Uncle Mark. He hesitated, then agreed to meet at this diner we used to go to when I was a kid. I used to love their chocolate milkshakes. The thought of sitting across from him there now now made me feel sick. I arrived early and chose a booth in the back. The vinyl seat squeaked beneath me as I slid in, the familiar scent of grease and coffee filling my nostrils. I started the recording device and slipped it into my jacket pocket. My dad showed up right on time, looking older than I remembered. There were new lines around his eyes, and his hair seemed grayer. He sat down across from me without a hug or even a smile. We ordered food neither of us would eat. I picked at my fries while trying to figure out how to start this conversation. In the end, I just went for it. I told him I knew about the binder in his drawer. I watched his face carefully as I said it. He didn't look surprised or shocked. He just looked tired. "You shouldn't have been in my study," he said. That's it. Not denying what I found. Just upset I found it. I pushed harder. I asked him how long he'd been involved with Uncle Mark's activities. He stared at his coffee for a long time before answering. The spoon clinked against the ceramic as he stirred it absently. When he finally spoke, his voice was so quiet I had to lean forward to hear him. He told me it started when they were kids. Uncle Mark was 4 years older than my dad. It began with Mark showing my dad special games they could play. My dad was Mark's first victim, but as Mark got older, he realized he preferred girls. Then he taught my dad how to do it too. How to watch without being seen. How to record without leaving evidence. I felt sick listening to him talk. Part of me felt sorry for him, the little boy who was victimized by his older brother. But another part of me was disgusted by the man sitting across from me. The man who had continued the cycle. The man who had let his brother target his own daughter. "Why didn't you protect me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "You knew what he was capable of. You knew what he was doing." My dad looked at me then, really looked at me, for what felt like the first time in years. "I thought I was protecting you," he said, "by keeping you away from him as much as possible, by making sure you never went back to that room." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "But you let him take pictures of me. You let him into our house." He shook his head. "I didn't know about the book with your name until you told us that day. I swear." I went to confront him about it later, but he threatened to expose me if I said anything. I was trapped. I didn't know if I believed him. I didn't know if I wanted to believe him. "And what about the girl in your binder? Did you protect her too?" He didn't answer that. He just stared down at the table. I pushed my plate away and stood up. I couldn't sit there anymore. I couldn't breathe the same air as him. "I have to go," I said. He didn't try to stop me. I drove straight to Detective Matthews' office and handed over the recording. He and Jacqueline listened to it together while I sat there feeling numb. When it was over, Jacqueline put her hand on my shoulder. "This is good," she said. "It's not a full confession, but it's enough to get a warrant to search your parents' house more thoroughly." The next few days were a blur. They executed the search warrant while my mom was at work. They found more binders in a hidden compartment in my dad's study. More evidence, more victims. My mom called me screaming, asking what I'd done. I hung up on her. 2 days later, they arrested my dad. I watched from my car as they led him out of the house in handcuffs. He looked small somehow, diminished. My mom stood in the doorway, her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. I didn't go to her. I couldn't. The preliminary hearing was set for the following week. Jacqueline explained that they didn't have as much physical evidence against my dad as they did against Uncle Mark, but my recording combined with the binders they found was enough to hold him. She asked if I would be willing to testify if it came to that. I said yes, even though the thought made me want to throw up. The night before the hearing, my dad asked to speak with me. Jacqueline advised against it, but I needed to hear what he had to say. They set it up in an interview room at the police station. Detective Matthews stood in the corner while I sat across from my dad at a metal table. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting harsh shadows across his haggard face. He looked terrible. His eyes were sunken, his jail uniform hanging loose on his frame. He'd only been in custody for a few days, but it looked like he'd aged years. He didn't waste time with small talk. "I'm going to plead guilty," he said, "and I'm going to tell them everything I know about Mark." I hadn't expected that. "Why?" "Because I need to protect you," he said. Something I should have done a long time ago. I didn't know what to say to that. Part of me wanted to scream at him that it was too late, that he'd had his chance to protect me and he'd chosen his brother instead. But another part of me, a small, wounded part, was grateful. It meant I wouldn't have to testify. I wouldn't have to sit in a courtroom and tell strangers about finding that room, about seeing those pictures of myself. "Mark is dangerous," my dad continued. "More dangerous than people realize. The things they found. It's just the surface. There's more, much more." A chill ran down my spine. "What do you mean?" He leaned forward, lowering his voice even though I'm sure Detective Matthews could still hear every word. "The missing kids, the ones they haven't found yet. Mark kept records of everything, but not all of it was in that room." I felt my stomach drop. "Where else?" "There's a cabin, up near Lake Millerton. It belonged to our grandfather. Mark took it over after he died. No one else in the family ever goes there." Detective Matthews stepped forward at that point. "We'll need the exact location." My dad nodded. "I'll give you everything. Maps, directions. The key is hidden under a fake rock by the back door." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. How long had he known about this cabin? How many kids had disappeared while he kept this secret? "Why now?" I asked. "Why are you suddenly willing to talk?" He looked at me with tears in his eyes. "Because I saw your face when they arrested me. I saw what I've done to you, what I've allowed to happen to you, and I can't live with it anymore." I didn't know if I believed him. I didn't know if it mattered. What mattered was that he was talking. That maybe, finally, some of those families would get answers about their missing children. The next day, a team of officers and forensic experts went to the cabin. I stayed at my apartment, jumping every time my phone rang. Jacqueline called me that evening. Her voice was tight, controlled. "We found them," she said. 6 bodies, all matching missing children reports from the last 15 years. I sat down hard on my couch. 6 kids. 6 families who had spent years wondering, hoping, praying. 6 lives cut short by my uncle. And my father had known. Maybe not everything, but enough. He'd known, and he'd said nothing. "There's something else," Jacqueline continued. "We found journals. Detailed accounts of everything. Your uncle wrote about your father's involvement. It seems your dad wasn't just a passive participant. He helped. He participated." I hung up the phone and ran to the bathroom, barely making it before I threw up. I stayed there on the cold tile floor for hours, unable to move, unable to process what I'd learned. My father wasn't just a victim who failed to protect me. He was an active participant in the abuse and unaliving of children like me. The next morning, I woke up still on the bathroom floor, my body stiff and aching. I checked my phone to find dozens of missed calls and texts, some from Jacqueline and Detective Matthews, some from reporters who had somehow gotten my number, and one from my mom. "We need to talk," was all it said. I didn't want to talk to her. I didn't want to hear her defend my dad or blame me for what was happening, but a small part of me wondered if she had known too, if she had been part of it somehow. I needed to know. I agreed to meet her at a park near my apartment. Neutral ground, public, safe. I got there early and sat on a bench watching people walk their dogs and jog along the paths. Normal people living normal lives. I wondered if I would ever feel normal again. My mom showed up looking like she hadn't slept in days. Her hair was unwashed, her clothes wrinkled. She sat next to me without saying hello. We both stared straight ahead for a long time. The sound of children playing on the nearby playground created a surreal backdrop to our silence. Did you know? I finally asked. About Dad and Uncle Mark? She shook her head slowly. Not everything. Not the unaliving. But I knew something wasn't right between them. The way Mark looked at you sometimes. The way your dad would get so angry whenever you mentioned that day you found the room. And you did nothing, I said. It wasn't a question. She turned to look at me then, her eyes red-rimmed and desperate. I was afraid. Afraid of losing everything. Afraid of what would happen to our family. Afraid of what would happen to you if it all came out. So you let it continue. You let other kids get hurt. She flinched like I'd slapped her. I didn't know about the other children. I swear I didn't know how far it went. I didn't know if I believed her. I didn't know if it mattered. The damage was done. Lives were destroyed, including mine. What happens now? She asked, her voice small. Now they go to prison, I said, for a very long time, maybe forever. And us? What happens to us? I looked at her then, really looked at her. The mother who had failed to protect me, who had chosen silence over truth, who had put her comfort above my safety, above the safety of other children. I don't know, I said honestly. I don't know if there is an us anymore. She started crying then, quiet sobs that shook her shoulders. I didn't comfort her. I couldn't. I just sat there, feeling nothing but a strange, hollow emptiness where my family used to be. The weeks that followed were a nightmare of police interviews, prosecutor meetings, and reporters camping outside my apartment. I took a leave of absence from work. I couldn't focus, couldn't sleep, couldn't eat. I lost 15 pounds in 3 weeks. My uncle's case was proceeding quickly. The evidence against him was overwhelming. My dad's case was more complicated. His confession helped, but his lawyer was trying to paint him as a victim too. Someone who had been groomed and manipulated by his older brother. Someone who deserved leniency. I met with Jacqueline regularly to prepare for the possibility that I might need to testify. She was worried about my mental state. She suggested I see a therapist, gave me names of people who specialized in trauma. I put the list in a drawer and didn't look at it. One night, about a month after my dad's arrest, I got a call from the county jail. It was my dad. I almost didn't accept the call, but something made me press the button. I need to tell you something, he said without preamble. Something I haven't told the police yet. My heart started racing. What is it? There's another place, another cabin, near the state line. Mark owns it under a different name. There are more records there, more evidence. I felt sick. Why are you telling me this? Why not tell the police directly? He was quiet for a moment. Because I wanted you to know that I'm trying to make things right, as much as I can. I know it doesn't change what happened, what I did, what I allowed to happen to you, but I need you to know that I'm trying. I didn't know what to say to that. I told him I would pass the information to Detective Matthews and hung up. I sat in the dark of my apartment for a long time after that call, trying to make sense of my feelings. I hated my dad for what he'd done, for his weakness, for his complicity. But a small part of me, a part I wasn't proud of, was grateful that he was finally doing the right thing, even if it was too late. I called Detective Matthews the next morning and told him what my dad had said. He thanked me and promised to check it out right away. 2 days later, Jacqueline called to confirm they had found the second cabin, and more evidence, more victims. The scope of my uncle's crimes was growing, becoming something almost too horrific to comprehend. My dad's preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following week. His lawyer was still pushing for a plea deal, but the prosecutor was resistant, especially with the new evidence coming to light. I wasn't sure what I wanted to happen. Part of me wanted him to face the maximum punishment possible. Another part of me just wanted it all to be over. The night before the hearing, I couldn't sleep. I paced my apartment, checking the locks over and over. Around 3 a.m., I found myself looking at the list of therapists Jacqueline had given me. I picked up my phone and sent an email to the first name on the list, asking for an appointment. It was a small step, but it felt important somehow. An acknowledgement that I needed help, that I couldn't handle this alone. The next morning, I got dressed carefully for the hearing. I wanted to look strong, composed. I didn't want my dad or anyone else to see how broken I felt inside. I drove to the courthouse with my windows down, the cool morning air helping to clear my head. Jacqueline met me outside, her face serious. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. I nodded, even though I wasn't sure if anyone could ever be ready for something like this. We walked into the courthouse together, past the reporters and cameras. I kept my head down, ignoring the shouted questions. Inside, I took a seat in the back of the courtroom. I didn't want to be too close, didn't want to have to look my dad in the eye. The room filled up quickly. Reporters, legal staff, curious onlookers. My mom came in but sat on the opposite side of the room. We didn't acknowledge each other. When they brought my dad in, I almost didn't recognize him. He looked so small in his orange jumpsuit, his shoulders hunched, his eyes downcast. He didn't look around the room, didn't try to find me in the crowd. He just sat next to his lawyer and stared at the table in front of him. The hearing proceeded quickly. The charges were read, the evidence summarized. My dad's lawyer spoke briefly about his client's cooperation, his willingness to testify against his brother. The prosecutor countered with the severity of the crimes, the number of victims, the years of deception. And then, unexpectedly, my dad asked to speak. The judge allowed it, though he looked skeptical. My dad stood up slowly, his hands shaking. He didn't use notes. He just spoke, his voice quiet but clear in the hushed courtroom. "I know that nothing I say can undo what I've done," he began. "I know that I don't deserve forgiveness or mercy, but I want the court to know that I am pleading guilty not as part of any deal, not to get a lighter sentence, but because it's the right thing to do. Because those families deserve the truth. Because my daughter deserves the truth." He looked up then, scanning the room until he found me. Our eyes met for a brief moment before I looked away. I couldn't bear to hold his gaze. I failed as a brother when I didn't stop Mark. I failed as a father when I didn't protect my child. I failed as a human being when I participated in these horrible acts. I accept whatever punishment the court decides is appropriate. All I ask is that my cooperation be taken into account not for my benefit, but to ensure that Mark never has the opportunity to hurt another child again. The courtroom was silent when he finished. I sat there, tears streaming down my face, unsure of what I was feeling. Relief? Anger? A twisted kind of closure? Maybe all of those things at once. The judge thanked my dad for his statement and announced that formal sentencing would take place after a pre-sentence investigation. My dad was led away, back to his cell to await his fate. I watched him go, this man who had been my father, who had betrayed me in the most fundamental way possible, who was now trying, too late, to do the right thing. Jacqueline found me outside the courtroom, sitting on a bench, staring at nothing. She sat next to me, not speaking, just offering her presence. After a while, she told me that because of my dad's cooperation, they might be able to close dozens of cold cases, bring closure to families who had been waiting years for answers. It was something at least. A small good coming from so much evil. I nodded, unable to find words. I was exhausted, drained in a way I had never experienced before. But underneath the exhaustion was something else, something that felt almost like a beginning of healing. The truth was out, the secrets exposed to light. It wasn't an ending. I knew the road ahead would be long and painful, but it was a start. As I walked out of the courthouse into the bright afternoon sun, I took a deep breath. For the first time in weeks, maybe years, it felt like a real breath, like my lungs could expand fully, like the weight on my chest had lightened just a little. I had no idea what would happen next. I didn't know if I would ever speak to my mother again. I didn't know how I would rebuild my life after this. I didn't know if the nightmares would ever stop, but I knew one thing for certain. I had survived. I had spoken the truth. I had broken the cycle of secrets and silence that had nearly destroyed me, and for today, that was enough. I didn't sleep at all that night. I kept thinking about what my dad had said about protecting me. It was such bullpoop. If he wanted to protect me, he should have done it when I was 8. He should have turned in his brother the moment I told him what I found. Instead, he chose to protect a monster, to be a monster himself. The next morning, I got a call from Detective Matthews. They'd found even more evidence at the second cabin my dad had told them about. Photos, videos, journals, all meticulously organized and dated. Some of the material went back 30 years. 30 effing years of abuse that no one stopped. Your dad's cooperation is making a huge difference in building our case, Matthews told me. The DA thinks we can get life without parole for your uncle. I should have felt relieved, but all I felt was numb. What about my dad? That's more complicated, Matthews said. His lawyer is pushing hard on the he was a victim too angle. With his cooperation, he might get a reduced sentence. The thought of my dad getting less time made my stomach turn. Victim or not, he'd made choices. Terrible choices that hurt children. That hurt me. I need to see him again, I said, surprising myself. Before any deals are made. Matthews hesitated. Are you sure that's a good idea? I wasn't sure of anything anymore, but I knew I needed answers only my dad could give me. I'm sure. 2 days later, I was back in that same interview room at the police station. My dad looked even worse than before. The orange jumpsuit hung off his frame like he'd lost 20 pounds. His eyes were sunken, his skin gray. He looked up when I walked in, a flicker of something like hope crossing his face before disappearing. Thank you for coming, he said, his voice hoarse. I sat down across from him, keeping my hands in my lap so he wouldn't see them shaking. I'm not here for you. I'm here for me. I need answers. He nodded slowly. Anything. Ask me anything. Did you ever? I couldn't finish the sentence. The question that had been haunting me since I found that binder in his drawer. He seemed to understand what I was asking. Never. Not you. I swear to God. I wanted to believe him. I needed to believe him, but trust was a luxury I couldn't afford anymore. But you let Uncle Mark take those pictures of me. You let him into our house knowing what he was. My dad's eyes filled with tears. Mark had something on me. Evidence of what I'd done with other children. He threatened to expose me if I didn't let him have access to you. I thought I could protect you by being there, by making sure he was never alone with you. I was wrong. I was a coward. His admission hit me like a physical blow. I'd suspected it, but hearing him say it out loud made it real in a way it hadn't been before. How many? I asked, my voice barely audible. How many kids did you hurt? He looked down at his hands. 3 that I participated with directly. More that I helped Mark with. I felt sick. The room seemed to tilt slightly. And the girl in the binder I found? What happened to her? She's alive, he said quickly. I just watched, took pictures. I never touched her. As if that made it better. As if being a voyeur to a child's abuse was somehow less evil than committing the abuse yourself. I don't know if I can ever forgive you, I said, the words scraping my throat like broken glass. I don't expect you to, he replied. I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want you to know that I'm going to do everything I can to make sure Mark never gets out, even if it means I spend the rest of my life in prison too. I studied his face, looking for signs of manipulation or deception. All I saw was defeat and what looked like genuine remorse, but I'd been fooled by him before, for my entire life. Why should I believe anything you say now? He sighed heavily. You shouldn't. I've given you no reason to trust me. All I can do is try to prove it with my actions from here on out. I stood up to leave. I'd heard enough, but at the door, I turned back. One more thing. Does Mom know about what you did? About the other children? He shook his head firmly. Numbers. She knew something was wrong between Mark and me. She suspected Mark might have inappropriate interests, but she never knew about my involvement. I kept that from her. I nodded, not sure if I believed him, but wanting to. The thought of my mom knowing, of her allowing this to happen, was almost too much to bear. As I was leaving, Detective Matthews caught up with me in the hallway. Your dad just gave us names, 3 more victims we didn't know about, and locations for 2 more sites where your uncle might have hidden evidence. I leaned against the wall, suddenly exhausted. Is it ever going to end? How many kids did they hurt? Matthews looked grim. We don't know yet, but we're going to find out, thanks to your dad's cooperation. I laughed bitterly. Don't make him sound like a hero. He's only talking to save his own skin. Maybe, Matthews conceded, but the information is still valuable. It's still helping us build our case. I left the police station feeling hollow. The bright summer day seemed at odds with the darkness I was carrying inside me. I drove aimlessly for hours, eventually ending up at a park I used to visit as a kid. I sat on a bench and watched children play, their parents hovering nearby, vigilant and protective, the way parents should be. My phone rang. It was Jacqueline Wilson, the prosecutor. We've got a problem, she said without preamble. Your uncle is offering a deal. He says he has information about other perpetrators, a whole network of them. In exchange, he wants a reduced sentence. My blood ran cold. You can't seriously be considering it. We have to consider all options, Jacqueline said carefully. If there really is a network, there could be dozens more victims out there. Children who are being abused right now. I closed my eyes, trying to process this new horror. What does my dad say about this network? He claims he doesn't know anything about it. Says Mark kept him isolated, that their activities were just between the 2 of them. And you believe him? Jacqueline sighed. I don't know what to believe anymore. This case keeps getting bigger, more complicated. We need to be sure we're getting the full picture. After we hung up, I sat there for a long time, watching the sun set over the park. The thought of my uncle getting any kind of deal made me physically ill, but if there were other children at risk, I didn't know what the right answer was. The next day, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was my cousin Jake, the same cousin I'd been playing hide and seek with all those years ago. We hadn't spoken in months, not since before my uncle's arrest. I need to see you, he said, his voice tight with emotion. There's something I need to tell you. We met at a coffee shop downtown. Jake looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in days. His hands shook as he lifted his coffee cup. I knew, he said without preamble. I knew about the room, about what my dad was doing. doing. I stared at him, speechless. Jake was 3 years older than me. He would have been 11 when I found that room. How? I finally managed to ask. I found it the same way you did, playing hide and seek. But a year before you did, my dad caught me in there. Jake's voice broke. He made sure I never told anyone. The implication was clear. Jake had been a victim too. My heart broke for him, for the scared little boy he'd been. Why are you telling me this now? I asked gently. Because I heard he's trying to make a deal, claiming there's some network of pedophiles he can expose. Jake's face hardened. It's bullpoop. There's no network. Just him and your dad. He's lying to save himself. I believed Jake. Something about the certainty in his voice, the pain in his eyes. Will you tell the police? The prosecutor? He nodded slowly. That's why I wanted to see you first. I needed you to know that I'm sorry. Sorry I didn't protect you back then. Sorry I kept quiet for so long. I reached across the table and took his hand. You were a child, Jake. It wasn't your responsibility to protect me. It was the adults who failed us both. 2 days later, Jake gave his statement to Detective Matthews and Jacqueline Wilson. His testimony, combined with my dad's continued cooperation, was enough to convince the DA to reject my uncle's offer. No deals. They were going for maximum sentences for both men. The preliminary hearings were set for the following month. I wasn't sure if I could face being in the same room as my uncle and my dad, listening to the details of their crimes laid bare. But I knew I had to be there, for myself and for all the other victims who couldn't speak for themselves. The night before the hearings, my mom showed up at my apartment unannounced. I almost didn't answer the door, but something made me look through the peephole. She looked terrible, thin, pale, with dark circles under her eyes. I let her in but kept my distance, standing with my arms crossed while she perched awkwardly on the edge of my couch. I've left your father, she said after a long silence. I've filed for divorce. I didn't know what to say to that. It seemed like the obvious thing to do given the circumstances. I want you to know that I never knew, she continued, her voice breaking. About the other children, about what he was doing with Mark. I swear to you I didn't know. But you knew something wasn't right, I said, unable to keep the accusation out of my voice. You knew I wasn't lying about what I found that day. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. I was afraid of what it would do to our family, afraid of losing everything. I told myself you must have misunderstood, that it couldn't be as bad as it seemed. Children died, Mom. Children were abused and murdered while you were worried about keeping up appearances. She flinched like I'd slapped her. I know. I'll never forgive myself for that. Never. I didn't have it in me to comfort her. Her guilt was her own to bear, just as my trauma was mine. I don't know if we can ever fix this, I said honestly. I don't know if I want to try. She nodded, wiping her tears. I understand, but I want you to know that I'm here if you ever need me, if you ever want to talk. After she left, I sat alone in my apartment, thinking about family and betrayal and the long road ahead, the hearings, the trial, the media attention that would follow. It would be brutal, but I would get through it. I had survived this long. I would survive the rest. The day of the hearings dawned bright and clear. I dressed carefully in clothes that made me feel strong. Dark jeans, a crisp button-down shirt, boots with a solid heel that made a satisfying sound when I walked, armor of a sort. Jacqueline met me outside the courthouse. Are you ready for this? I took a deep breath. As ready as I'll ever be. Inside, the courtroom was packed. Reporters, legal teams, family members of victims. I saw Jake sitting with his mom, my Aunt Diane, near the front. She looked broken, aged decades in just a few months. Jake gave me a small nod when our eyes met. When they brought my uncle in, I forced myself to look at him directly for the first time since his arrest. He seemed smaller somehow, less intimidating than the monster who had loomed so large in my nightmares. His eyes darted around the room, calculating, still looking for angles even now. My dad came in separately. He didn't look up, didn't search the crowd for familiar faces. He just sat next to his lawyer, shoulders slumped in defeat. The hearings proceeded with clinical efficiency. Charges read, evidence presented, testimony given. I listened as Detective Matthews described what they found in the hidden room, in the cabins, in my dad's study. I listened as the medical examiner detailed cause of death for the victims they had recovered. I listened as Jake testified about his own abuse, his voice steady despite the horror of his words. And then it was my turn. I walked to the witness stand, took the oath, and told my story. Finding the room, the black book with my name, the pictures, being dismissed by my parents, the years of fear and doubt, finding the binder in my dad's drawer, all of it. I didn't cry. I didn't falter. I just told the truth finally, after all these years of silence. When it was over, the judge ruled that there was more than enough evidence to proceed to trial for both men. No bail. They would remain in custody. As they were led away, my dad looked at me one last time. I held his gaze steadily until he was gone. Outside the courthouse, reporters shouted questions that I ignored. Jacqueline walked me to my car, promising to keep me updated on next steps. Jake caught up with us in the parking lot. You did good in there, he said simply. So did you, I replied. We stood there awkwardly for a moment, two survivors linked by trauma and blood. Maybe we could get coffee sometime, he suggested. Talk about normal stuff. I found myself nodding. I'd like that. As I drove home, I thought about the long road still ahead, the trial, the sentencing, the lifetime of processing what had happened to me, to Jake, to all those other children. It wouldn't be easy. There would be bad days, nightmares, moments when the weight of it all seemed too much to bear. But for the first time in as long as I could remember, I felt something like hope. The truth was out, the secrets exposed. My uncle and my dad would face justice for what they had done. It wasn't an ending, not really, but it was a beginning, a chance to build something new from the ashes of what had been destroyed. I wasn't okay. Not yet. Maybe not for a long time, but I would be, someday. And until then, I would keep putting one foot in front of the other, keep telling the truth, keep surviving. It was enough for now.